Hello, beautiful ladies. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Sarah, and today I'm going to share with you the most difficult but empowering story of my life. How I exposed my cheating husband in front of his entire family at the Thompson family reunion. Before we dive in, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because I have so much more to share with you all. Now picture this. It's a beautiful August afternoon in Georgia. 75 family members are gathered at Grandma Thompson's sprawling farm property for our annual family reunion. The air is filled with the smell of barbecued children's laughter and the warmth of family togetherness. And there's my husband, Michael, standing in the middle of it all, casually announcing that he has to leave me stranded 3 hours from home to handle a work emergency with his colleague, Amanda. As the entire family watched him prepare to walk away without a backward glance, I smiled and pulled out my phone. "Well," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Since Michael won't be needing a ride home, I guess this is the perfect time to share those photos I've been saving, the ones showing exactly what kind of work he's been doing with Amanda." Ladies, the silence that followed was deafening. But let me tell you how I got to that moment, because it's a journey every woman needs to hear. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't right in your marriage? That nagging voice in the back of your mind that you kept trying to silence? Drop a heart in the comments if you know exactly what I'm talking about. And please hit that like button if you believe women should trust their instincts. Because, honey, our intuition is usually spot on. My name is Sarah Thompson. Well, it was Thompson for 25 years. I'm 58 years old, recently divorced, and I want you to know that I'm not bitter. I'm grateful that I found the strength to uncover the truth and reclaim my life. I'm a freelance graphic designer, mother to 2 wonderful grown children, Jessica, who's 28, and David, who's 26. Both of them have been my rocks through this entire journey. Let me paint you a picture of what the Thompson family represented in our small Georgia community. We weren't wealthy, but we were what you'd call good people, the kind of family everyone looked up to. Michael's grandfather had built their reputation through 4 generations of hard work, honesty, and community service. The Thompson name meant something in our town. Michael was the golden boy of this family dynasty, where his older brother Spencer had spent his 20s traveling the world and changing careers, and his younger sister Julie had married young and divorced. Even younger Michael had followed the prescribed path to success with mathematical precision. He graduated summa cum laude from the University of Georgia's Business School, landed his first job before graduation, and worked his way up through pharmaceutical companies to become a regional sales director. In the Thompson family hierarchy, Michael occupied a special position. He was the responsible middle child who'd always done everything right. He was the one who remembered birthdays, contributed generously when family members faced financial emergencies, and never missed a holiday gathering. At family events, Michael was always organizing group photos, mediating cousin disputes, and making sure Grandma Thompson had everything she needed. And me? Well, I was Michael's wife, and that defined my entire identity within the family structure. Don't get me wrong, they were kind to me, but I was loved in the way you love a helpful service provider. I was useful, pleasant, and undemanding. I never caused drama, never competed for attention, and never challenged the established family dynamics. For 25 years, Michael and I had been the Thompson family's golden couple. We were the ones who arrived early to help set up, stayed late to clean up, and never forgot to bring exactly what we'd been asked to contribute. At Christmas, we coordinated our gifts to avoid duplicates. At weddings, we were the couple other relatives pointed to when giving relationship advice to younger family members. Look at Michael and Sarah. Aunt Carla would say, clutching her wine glass at family barbecues. 25 years married and they still hold hands. They still laugh at each other's jokes. That's how you know it's real love. The irony wasn't lost on me later. We had held hands because Michael was always conscious of appearances. We did laugh at each other's jokes because Michael had a well-developed sense of what looked good to an audience. Every gesture of affection, every loving glance, every sweet comment had been perfectly calculated to maintain our image as the couple who'd figured it all out. Looking back now, I can see how much of our relationship had been performance. Michael was naturally charming, effortlessly likable, and skilled at reading what people wanted to see. He'd simply applied those same talents to our marriage, giving me just enough attention and affection to keep me content, while reserving his real passion for elsewhere. Ladies, if you're watching this and thinking about your own marriage, let me ask you, when was the last time your husband looked at you, the way he looked at you when you were dating? When was the last time he seemed genuinely excited to spend time with you? Comment below and let me know, because these are the questions I wish I'd asked myself years ago. The Thompson family reunion happened every August at Grandma Thompson's property, 60 acres of farmland that had been in the family for 4 generations. Picture white tents scattered across emerald grass picnic tables, groaning under the weight of Southern comfort food, and approximately 75 family members, ranging from toddlers to great-grandparents, all gathered to celebrate another year of Thompson family unity. This year's reunion was going to be different, though none of them knew it yet. This year, the truth was finally going to come out. And ladies, let me tell you, when the truth finally surfaces after years of lies, it doesn't just trickle out. It explodes like a dam bursting, and everything in its path gets swept away. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let me tell you exactly how I went from being the quiet, accommodating wife to the woman who brought down the Thompson family's golden boy in front of everyone who mattered to him. Because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about finding your voice, trusting your instincts, and discovering that you're stronger than you ever imagined. Now, before I tell you about that explosive moment at the family reunion, I need to take you back to where it all began. Because, ladies, the signs were there long before I was ready to see them. And I want to share this with you because I know some of you watching might be experiencing similar feelings right now. It started in early spring, about 6 months before the reunion. Michael began mentioning a new colleague named Amanda Parker who had joined his sales team. At first, the mentions were casual. You know, the kind of workplace chatter that happens in any marriage. Amanda suggested a new approach to the hospital accounts, or Amanda and I are working late to finish the quarterly reports. Normal workplace collaboration, or so it seemed. But ladies, let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how your husband's voice changes when he talks about certain people? How his eyes light up in a way they haven't for you in years? Drop a comment if you know exactly what I'm talking about, because that's the first thing I noticed. As the weeks progressed, Amanda's name began appearing in our conversations with increasing frequency. Amanda thinks we should try that new restaurant downtown. Amanda mentioned she loves hiking. Maybe we should plan a weekend trip. Amanda has this theory about work-life balance that really makes sense, and I found myself feeling like a third wheel in conversations about my own husband's life. More troubling was how Michael's entire demeanor changed when he talked about her. His voice became more animated, his eyes brighter. He displayed an enthusiasm I hadn't seen from him in years, certainly not when he talked about our own plans or dreams. Ladies, if you're nodding along right now, if you recognize this pattern, please know that you're not imagining things. Trust that voice in your head. I wish I had trusted mine sooner. The red flags started as tiny pinpricks of unease that I initially dismissed as paranoia. You know how we do that, don't we? We gaslight ourselves because it's easier than facing a painful truth. Michael began working later, claiming important projects with tight deadlines. His weekend work calls became more frequent and lasted longer. He'd step out onto our back porch for these conversations, speaking in hushed tones that carried just enough for me to know he was discussing more than quarterly sales figures. Let me pause here and ask you something. Have any of you noticed your husband suddenly becoming secretive about phone calls? Maybe he says it's work, but something feels off. Share your experiences in the comments because we women need to support each other through these intuitive moments. His appearance started changing too. Subtle improvements that he attributed to wanting to make a good impression on the new team. New cologne, more expensive shirts, a sudden interest in fitness that led to a gym membership he'd been avoiding for years. When I complimented these changes, he'd deflect with comments about professional development and company image. But the most telling change was in his treatment of me. Not cruel or obviously neglectful, but distant, preoccupied, like I was a familiar piece of furniture he'd grown so accustomed to that he barely registered my presence anymore. Our conversations became increasingly superficial, logistics about schedules, bills, and household maintenance. The deeper connections, the intimate late-night talks that had once defined our relationship simply evaporated. Ladies, this is where I need to get real with you for a moment. How many of you have felt invisible in your own home? How many of you have tried to start meaningful conversations with your husband only to feel like you're talking to a wall? If this resonates with you, please leave a heart in the comments. You're not alone in this feeling. I remember one evening in particular. It was a Tuesday in early May. I had prepared Michael's favorite dinner-lit candles, put on music. I thought maybe if I tried harder, if I was more romantic, more interesting, I could recapture his attention. We sat across from each other at our dining room table, and I asked him about his day. Really tried to engage with him about his work, his dreams, his thoughts. He answered in monosyllables while scrolling through his phone. When I asked him to put it away so we could talk, he looked at me with such emptiness, like I was interrupting something important. "Sarah," he said, "I'm tired. Can we just eat in peace?" That night, lying in bed next to a man who felt like a stranger, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when I had become so unnecessary. When had my presence in his life become something to be endured rather than enjoyed? But here's where the story takes a turn, ladies, because sometimes the universe has a way of showing us exactly what we need to see, even when we're not ready for it. The moment that shattered my willful ignorance happened on a Tuesday evening in early July. Michael had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he showered, something that had never bothered either of us before. We'd always had an open device policy in our marriage. No passwords, no hidden screens. Complete transparency born from complete trust. A notification popped up from Instagram, and I glanced over casually expecting to see a work-related message or a post from one of his college friends. Instead, I saw a direct message preview from an account named Amanda P. Adventures. The visible text read, "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about." Ladies, I want you to imagine that moment. Your heart stops. Your hands start shaking. Everything you thought you knew about your life suddenly feels like it's built on quicksand. Have any of you experienced that moment of devastating clarity? Let me know in the comments because I need you to know you're not alone. With trembling fingers, I clicked on the conversation thread, and my entire world collapsed in the span of 30 seconds. Months of messages, photos of romantic dinners I'd never attended, pictures of weekend getaways during Michael's supposed business trips, images of hotel rooms, wine glasses, and intimate moments that should have belonged to us. But the most devastating discovery wasn't the evidence of their affair. It was the casual cruelty with which they discussed me. Screenshots of text conversations where Michael complained about my boring personality, my lack of ambition, my clingy behavior. Messages where Amanda made jokes about the wife who doesn't understand him, and suggestions for lies Michael could tell to spend more time with her. I sat in our kitchen that night staring at irrefutable proof of my husband's betrayal, and something inside me broke. But it wasn't just heartbreak, it was something deeper. It was the death of the naive woman I had been, and the birth of someone I didn't recognize yet. Now, let me ask you something, ladies. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have confronted him immediately? Would you have started screaming and throwing things? Comment below and tell me, because I want to know how other women handle these earth-shattering moments. Because what I did surprised even me. Instead of waking Michael up and demanding explanations instead of confronting him with the evidence, I did something that would change everything. I started taking screenshots, lots of them. You see, what Michael didn't know about his quiet, accommodating wife was that my work as a freelance graphic designer had evolved far beyond creating brochures for local businesses. Over the past few years, I'd been working with corporate clients on digital investigations, tracking down copyright infringement, documenting intellectual property theft, and gathering evidence for litigation support. Graphic design in the digital age isn't just about making things look pretty. It's about understanding how images move through online spaces, how metadata reveals location and timing information, and how to trace the digital footprints that people leave behind without even realizing it. I had developed expertise in digital forensics that most people assumed was purely technical work, done by specialists in government agencies. My specialty was corporate espionage cases, situations where companies suspected employees of selling secrets to competitors or using company resources for personal gain. I'd learned to follow money trails through social media posts, identify relationships through image analysis, and document patterns of behavior that revealed deception. Lawyers paid me very well for these skills, but I'd never mentioned this work to Michael because I thought he'd find it boring. How wrong I was about what would prove boring to him. That night, as Michael slept peacefully beside me, completely unaware that his secret life had been exposed, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't confront him privately. I wouldn't give him the opportunity to gaslight me, to minimize his actions, or to craft some elaborate explanation that would make me question my own sanity. Instead, I would let him walk into his own trap. The next morning, I sat in my home office, the space Michael saw as my little hobby room, where I played with design projects, and opened a new case file on my secure drive. I labeled it Project Thompson. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of purpose. Ladies, have any of you ever experienced that moment when you realize you're stronger than you thought? When you discover capabilities you didn't know you had? Because that's what happened to me that morning. The skills I'd been using to catch corporate cheaters were about to be applied to my own marriage. Using specialized software I'd purchased for client work, I created a comprehensive timeline. Every business trip, every late night, every weekend emergency was plotted against Amanda's social media activity. The pattern that emerged was damning in its precision. Michael's overnight conference in Birmingham corresponded perfectly with Amanda's Instagram story from a luxury hotel in the same city. His client dinner that ran late aligned with her Facebook check-in at an upscale steakhouse across town. But the real gold mine was in the metadata. Every photo Amanda posted contained embedded information about when and where it was taken. The romantic sunset dinner she'd shared on June 15th. The GPS coordinates placed it at a restaurant in Savannah on the same day Michael claimed to be in an all-day meeting with hospital administrators. The hiking trip she documented in early July. The location data showed it was taken at Amicalola Falls during the weekend. Michael told me he was attending mandatory compliance training. I began methodically screenshotting everything, but I didn't stop at just saving the images. Using professional-grade software, I documented the metadata for each photo, creating an unshakable timeline of their relationship. Every romantic getaway, every intimate dinner, every stolen weekend was now documented with scientific precision. But then I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about Michael's betrayal. While reviewing his company expense reports with forensic precision, I found fraudulent submissions that went back almost 2 years, predating Amanda's employment by 6 months. Michael hadn't just been unfaithful, he'd been systematically stealing from his company long before he met his current mistress. The expensive dinners, luxury hotel stays, and weekend getaways that I'd attributed to his affair with Amanda were actually part of a much larger pattern of financial manipulation. My husband wasn't just an unfaithful spouse. He was a career criminal who'd been embezzling company funds for years. Ladies, I need you to understand something here. This discovery changed everything. It wasn't just about an affair anymore. It was about discovering that the man I'd trusted with my life, my future, my financial security, was not who I thought he was at all. Over the next 2 weeks, I conducted a forensic review of our joint accounts, credit card statements, and Michael's expense reports. The evidence was stunning in its audacity. Michael had been using our joint credit card to pay for his affairs, then categorizing the expenses as legitimate business costs for reimbursement. The romantic dinner in Savannah submitted as a client entertainment expense. The luxury hotel in Birmingham filed as conference accommodation. The expensive jewelry I'd found charged to our Visa listed as a corporate gift for key account management. Michael wasn't just cheating on me. He was stealing from both me and his company to fund his betrayal. Each receipt told a story of calculated deception, and I documented every transaction with the thoroughness of a forensic accountant. By the end of 2 weeks, I had proof that Michael had fraudulently claimed over $80,000 in fake business expenses over 5 years to pay for his affairs, not just with Amanda, but with others before her. Ladies, let me ask you, how well do you really know the person you're married to? How much of your life together might be built on lies you haven't discovered yet? These are hard questions, but they're important ones. Share your thoughts in the comments. As I assembled this evidence, I realized that the upcoming family reunion wasn't just a social gathering anymore. It was going to be my stage, the place where the truth would finally be revealed, where Michael's carefully constructed image as the perfect son, perfect husband, perfect family man would crumble before the eyes of everyone who mattered to him. Because here's what I learned during those weeks of investigation. Michael had been planning to leave his job, liquidate his assets, and disappear with Amanda to start a new life funded by stolen money. The reunion was meant to be his final performance as the perfect family man before he vanished into a new identity. But Michael had made one critical miscalculation. He'd underestimated the woman he'd married, and that mistake was about to cost him everything. The perfect crime was about to meet the perfect investigator, and I had home field advantage. Are you ready to hear what happened next, ladies? Because things are about to get very interesting. But first, let me know in the comments. Do you think I was right to gather all this evidence? Should I have confronted him privately? Instead, I want to hear your thoughts because your perspectives matter to me. And please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because the next part of this story, where I plan the perfect confrontation, is something you won't want to miss. Now, ladies, here's where I want to get really honest with you about something that might surprise you. After discovering the full extent of Michael's betrayal, not just the affair, but years of embezzlement and lies, I had a choice to make. And I know some of you might think I should have just packed my bags and left quietly, or confronted him privately in our kitchen. But I want to ask you something. How many times have we women been told to handle our pain quietly, to protect other people's feelings even when they've destroyed ours, to keep family secrets and maintain appearances even when we're the ones being hurt? Drop a comment if you've ever been told to keep it in the family when someone wronged you. Because I was tired of being quiet. I was tired of protecting Michael's reputation while he destroyed mine. The family reunion was 3 weeks away, and as I sat in my home office surrounded by evidence of Michael's crimes, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront him privately. I wasn't going to give him the chance to manipulate me with crocodile tears and empty promises. I was going to let him expose himself in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to him. Now some of you might be thinking, Sarah, that seems harsh. Why not just leave quietly? And I understand that perspective. But let me tell you why I chose the family reunion as my stage. The Thompson family had spent 25 years celebrating Michael as their golden boy. They'd held him up as the example of everything a Thompson man should be. They'd compared their own sons and husbands to him, always finding them lacking. They'd trusted him with their money, their secrets, their unconditional love. They deserved to know who they'd really been worshiping all these years. More importantly, I deserved to have witnesses to my truth. For too many years, I'd been gaslit and manipulated in the privacy of our home. Michael was a master at making me question my own perceptions, my own memories, my own sanity. But he couldn't gaslight 75 people at once. Ladies, have any of you ever been in a situation where someone made you doubt your own reality, where you started to think maybe you were crazy, maybe you were imagining things? Let me know in the comments, because this is so important for us to talk about. I spent the next week creating what I called my presentation strategy. Yes, I approached this like a business presentation because that's exactly what it was. I was presenting the facts to Michael's board of directors, also known as his family. First, I had to consider the logistics. How do you present complex evidence to 75 people at an outdoor family gathering? I couldn't rely on sophisticated technology. Everything had to be visible, audible, and easy to understand without microphones or projection screens. I created poster boards that could be easily displayed and passed around. Each board focused on a specific aspect of Michael's deception timeline, of Lies affair documentation, financial fraud, and his escape plan. I made sure the text was large enough for Grandma Thompson to read from across the picnic area. For the digital evidence, I prepared multiple tablets and smartphones, each loaded with the most damaging photos, messages, and financial records. These devices would be passed through the crowd, allowing everyone to see the evidence firsthand rather than relying on my word alone. Most importantly, I prepared comprehensive evidence packets for every adult family member. Each packet contained copies of financial documents, photographs, and timeline information. I wanted everyone to have something they could take home, something they could reference later when Michael tried to convince them that I'd been lying or exaggerating. But here's the thing about planning something like this. It's not just about organizing evidence. It's about preparing yourself emotionally for what you're about to do. Because, ladies, I was about to destroy a man's life in front of his entire family. And even though he deserved it, even though he'd brought it on himself, that's not an easy thing to carry. I spent hours rehearsing my presentation in front of my bedroom mirror. I practiced staying calm, speaking clearly, and responding to the questions and accusations I knew would come. Because I knew that once I started this process, there would be no going back. Let me ask you something. Have any of you ever had to be strong in a situation where you felt like falling apart inside, where you had to hold it together for your own survival? Share your experiences in the comments, because I think we need to talk more about how we find strength we didn't know we had. 2 weeks before the reunion, Michael gave me the perfect opening. He came home from work with that familiar expression I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant he was about to lie to my face with complete confidence. "Honey," he said, sitting down at our kitchen table with a concerned look, "I just got word that there might be a major issue with one of our key accounts. The Riverside Medical Center contract is in jeopardy, and I might need to do some emergency client management over the reunion weekend." I stirred the pasta sauce I was making and asked, "What kind of emergency management?" "Well, Amanda and I might need to drive down to Jacksonville on Saturday for a crisis meeting. You know how these hospital administrators are. Everything has to be handled face to face with lots of relationship building." Ladies, I want you to understand what was happening here. Michael was setting up his alibi for abandoning me at the family reunion so he could run off with Amanda for a romantic weekend. And he was doing it with such casual confidence, such absolute certainty, that I would believe him and support him. "That sounds serious," I said, maintaining my role as the supportive wife. "I hope you can resolve it." "Oh, we will," Michael replied. "Amanda is brilliant at relationship management. She has this way of reading people and knowing exactly what they need to hear." The casual praise for Amanda made my stomach turn, but it also gave me valuable insight into Michael's mindset. He'd convinced himself that his attraction to her was based on professional admiration, that their relationship was built on shared competence rather than mutual deception. "There's just one thing," Michael continued. "If we do have to leave Saturday afternoon, would you be okay getting a ride back to Atlanta with Spencer? I know it's not ideal, but this crisis came out of nowhere." And there it was, Michael's complete plan laid out with such arrogant confidence. He was going to abandon me at his family reunion in front of everyone who knew us to run off with his mistress. And he expected me to smile and make it easy for him. "Of course," I said, "family will understand that work comes first sometimes." "You're amazing," Michael said, kissing my cheek. "I don't know what I'd do without you covering for me like this." Ladies, do you see the irony here? Michael was thanking me for enabling his betrayal. He was genuinely grateful that I was making it easier for him to lie to his family and abandon me for another woman. That night, as Michael slept peacefully beside me, I finalized my strategy. I would let him think his plan was working perfectly. I would attend the reunion, smile, and play the perfect wife, and wait for the exact moment when he tried to execute his escape plan. Because I knew something Michael didn't know. I knew that his overconfidence was his weakness. He'd become so comfortable lying to me that he'd stopped being careful. He'd grown so accustomed to my support that he'd taken it completely for granted. The week before the reunion, I made my final preparations. I had all my evidence organized and ready. I had practiced my presentation until I could deliver it calmly and clearly. I had prepared myself emotionally for what was about to happen. But I also did something else, something that was just for me. I went shopping and bought myself a new outfit for the reunion. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention away from what I had to say, but something that made me feel strong and confident and beautiful. Because ladies, here's what I learned during those weeks of preparation. When you're about to take control of your own narrative, when you're about to stop being a victim and start being a survivor, you dress for the role you want to play. I also wrote letters to my children, Jessica and David. I didn't give them to the kids. They were just for me to help me process what I was about to do. Because I knew that after the reunion, everything would be different. Not just for Michael and me, but for our whole family. The hardest part of the preparation wasn't organizing evidence or practicing presentations. It was accepting that the life I'd known for 25 years was about to end. The house we'd shared, the routines we'd built, the future I'd imagined, all of it was about to disappear. But you know what? For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not Michael's wife, not the Thompson family's perfect daughter-in-law, not the quiet woman who kept everyone else's secrets. Just Sarah. And Sarah was done being silent. Let me ask you something, ladies. Have you ever had a moment when you realized you were stronger than you thought? When you discovered you had the power to change your own story? Share those moments in the comments, because I think we all need to hear about women finding their strength. The night before the reunion, I packed my evidence carefully in a large tote bag that looked like typical family gathering supplies. The poster boards were rolled up and secured. The tablets were charged and loaded with evidence. The packets were sorted and labeled. Michael was excited about the reunion, talking about how much he was looking forward to seeing everyone, how family was the most important thing in life. He even helped me pack our overnight bags, chatting about which relatives he was most excited to see. The irony was almost unbearable. Here was a man who was planning to abandon his family forever, expressing such love and enthusiasm for the very people he was preparing to betray. But as I watched him pack, as I listened to him talk about family values and the importance of staying connected to the people who love you, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: anticipation. Because tomorrow at the Thompson family reunion, the truth was finally going to come out. And Michael's carefully constructed world was about to collapse in the most public and devastating way possible. Are you ready to hear what happened next, ladies? Because I'm about to tell you about the most empowering and terrifying day of my life. The day I stopped being a victim and became the author of my own story. But before we continue, please let me know in the comments. Do you think I was doing the right thing? Would you have handled it differently? And don't forget to hit that like button if you believe women deserve to have their truth heard and believed. Because what happened at that family reunion changed everything. Not just for me, but for everyone who thought they knew Michael Thompson. And I want every woman watching this to understand that you have more power than you think you do. You have more strength than you know, and you deserve so much better than being lied to and betrayed. The reunion was less than 12 hours away, and I was ready. Good morning, ladies. We're back, and if you've been following along, you know we're at the moment you've all been waiting for, the Thompson family reunion, where everything was about to change forever. I woke up that Saturday morning with a strange sense of calm. After weeks of preparation, after months of living with the weight of Michael's lies, I was finally going to be free to tell the truth. Michael was still sleeping beside me, and I looked at him one last time as the husband I had loved for 25 years, because I knew that after today, he would never be that person to me again. Let me paint you the picture of what we drove into that morning. Grandma Thompson's property looked exactly like a Norman Rockwell painting. 60 acres of rolling Georgia farmland dotted with white canvas tents, American flags fluttering in the gentle breeze, and the most incredible spread of Southern food you've ever seen. As we pulled up the gravel driveway, family members poured out of the main house to greet us. There was Uncle Frank with his booming laugh, Aunt Martha already wearing her apron and directing food preparation, and Cousin Jenny corralling her 3 young children who were beyond excited to see their favorite Uncle Michael. And there was Grandma Thompson herself, 86 years old, but still sharp as a tack, making her way slowly down the front porch steps to embrace her favorite grandson. "There's my successful boy," she said, patting Michael's cheek with such genuine love and pride. "I've been bragging to everyone at the senior center about how well you're doing at that pharmaceutical company." Ladies, I want you to imagine what it felt like to watch this scene, knowing what I knew. Here was this beautiful family so full of love and trust, welcoming home a man who was planning to abandon them all within hours. It broke my heart and strengthened my resolve at the same time. Have any of you ever had to smile and act normal when your world was falling apart inside? Let me know in the comments, because that's exactly what I did for the next several hours. The morning and early afternoon passed exactly as every Thompson reunion had for the past 25 years. There were pickup games of touch football storytelling sessions with the older relatives and enough food to feed a small army. Children ran between the tents while adults caught up on a year's worth of news. And Michael, he was in his element. He organized group photos, settled disputes between the cousins, and made sure Grandma Thompson had everything she needed. He was the perfect son, the reliable nephew, the beloved family member that everyone looked up to. I watched him work the crowd with skills I'd never fully appreciated before. He remembered everyone's names asked about their jobs and children and made each person feel like they were his favorite relative. He was building social capital with every conversation collecting admiration and trust like coins in a piggy bank. What made it even more painful was how genuinely happy the family was to see us. Aunt Carol pulled me aside to tell me how lucky I was to be married to such a wonderful man. Cousin Pete mentioned that he wished his own son would grow up to be like Uncle Michael. Even teenage relatives who usually couldn't be bothered with adult conversation sought Michael out to ask for advice about college and careers. The Thompson family had built their identity around pride in Michael's character and achievements. He wasn't just their golden boy. He was their proof that their values worked, that hard work and family loyalty led to success and happiness. Ladies, this is why I knew I had to tell them the truth. They deserved to know who they'd really been celebrating all these years. As the afternoon wore on, I kept my evidence bag close, but hidden. I participated in conversations, helped serve food, and played with the children, all while watching Michael and waiting for the moment I knew was coming. That moment arrived at exactly 2:47 p.m. I remember the time because I glanced at my watch when Michael's phone buzzed with what I knew would be the text from Amanda. He was standing near the main barbecue area, telling Uncle Frank a story about a particularly difficult client when his phone lit up. I watched his face change as he read the message. Surprise, then calculation, then that familiar expression of practiced regret. "Folks," Michael announced, raising his voice to get everyone's attention. "I hate to do this, but I just got an urgent message from work. There's a crisis with one of our biggest accounts, and I need to drive back to Atlanta immediately to handle it." The family responded exactly as I'd expected. There were murmurs of disappointment mixed with understanding and admiration. This was the Michael they knew, dedicated, responsible, always putting his professional obligations first. "Can it wait until Monday?" asked Anthony, Michael's father. Michael shook his head with apparent frustration. "I wish it could, Dad, but the client is threatening to cancel a $4.2 million contract if we don't have someone there tonight to address their concerns. Amanda is already on her way to meet me, and they specifically requested that both of us be present for this emergency meeting." Ladies, do you hear how smoothly he wove Amanda into the story? How he made it seem necessary and professional rather than suspicious? This man was a master manipulator, and his family had no idea. Then came the moment that made my blood boil. Michael turned to me with that expression of apologetic helplessness that I'd seen so many times before. "Sarah, honey, I know this is terrible timing, but I need to leave right now. The thing is, I picked up Amanda on the way here this morning because her car is in the shop and I need to drive her back to Atlanta for the client meeting. There's not really room for 3 people in my car with all the presentation materials we need to bring." The family was listening intently, accepting this explanation as another example of Michael's professional dedication. But I understood what was really happening. Michael was abandoning me at his family reunion in front of 75 witnesses so he could run off with his mistress, and he was making it sound like a noble sacrifice for his career. "Can't someone else give Sarah a ride home?" asked Julie, Michael's mother, immediately moving into problem-solving mode. "Of course we can work something out," Michael replied smoothly. "Spencer, would you mind giving Sarah a ride back to Atlanta tomorrow? I'll make sure to compensate you for the gas and inconvenience." Spencer nodded immediately. "No problem at all. I was planning to drive back tomorrow afternoon anyway." And there it was. Michael's escape plan executed perfectly in front of his entire family. He was about to walk away from me, from them, from everything, and they were helping him do it. Uncle Frank patted Michael's shoulder sympathetically. That's the price of success, son. The more valuable you become to your company, the more they depend on you for crucial situations. Grandma Thompson looked disappointed but proud. I hate that you have to miss the rest of the reunion, but I understand that sometimes work has to come first. That's what makes you such a good provider. Ladies, I need you to understand something here. This wasn't just about Michael lying to me anymore. He was lying to all these people who loved him, manipulating their trust and affection to cover his betrayal. And they were enabling his deception while believing they were supporting his integrity. As Michael began making his rounds to say goodbye to various family members, expressing regret about missing the rest of the reunion, I felt that familiar surge of clarity I'd experienced the night I discovered his affairs. This was my moment. The stage was set exactly as I'd hoped. The family was gathered, engaged, and emotionally invested in Michael's story. His attempt to abandon me had created the perfect dramatic tension for maximum impact. I stood up slowly, my evidence bag in hand, and cleared my throat loud enough to get everyone's attention. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the gathering. Before Michael leaves, I think there's something the family needs to know about these work emergencies. Michael turned toward me with a slightly puzzled expression, still confident that his cover story was secure. What do you mean, honey? I smiled at him with the same warmth I'd shown throughout our marriage, then reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Well, since you mentioned Amanda, I thought the family might be interested in seeing some photos from your recent business trips together. The shift in Michael's expression was immediate and dramatic. The confident smile vanished, replaced by a look of dawning horror as he realized that his carefully constructed life was about to collapse. I held up my phone so the family could see the screen, displaying a photograph of Michael and Amanda sharing an intimate dinner at a romantic restaurant. The image was crystal clear, them holding hands across a candlelit table, their body language unmistakably romantic rather than professional. This was taken during Michael's supposed business conference in Nashville 3 months ago, I explained calmly. The metadata shows it was captured at La Bella Vita, a romantic Italian restaurant in Asheville, North Carolina, approximately 200 miles from where Michael claimed to be attending mandatory training seminars. Ladies, I want you to imagine the silence that followed. 75 people suddenly understanding that something was very, very wrong with the story they'd just heard. Several family members leaned forward to get a better look at the image, while others turned to Michael for an explanation. The confusion on their faces was heartbreaking. These people loved Michael so much that they couldn't immediately process what they were seeing. Now I'm sure there's a perfectly innocent explanation. I continued swiping to the next photo. Perhaps this image of them kissing on a hotel balcony was also part of their professional relationship. The second photograph left no room for innocent interpretation. Michael and Amanda were clearly engaged in a passionate embrace against the backdrop of a luxury resort, their romantic involvement undeniable. Michael stood frozen in the center of the family gathering, his escape route suddenly blocked by the revelation of his deception. The car he'd planned to use for his romantic getaway with Amanda was still in the driveway, but leaving now would only confirm the accusations I was making. "Sarah, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice strained with panic. "You're taking these photos completely out of context." "Am I?" I replied, continuing to scroll through my evidence. "Let me show everyone the context." I pulled out my first poster board and set it up where everyone could see it clearly. It showed a comprehensive timeline of Michael's claimed business trips versus his actual locations with GPS data and photographic evidence documenting each deception. This timeline covers the past 8 months. I explained, my voice steady and professional. The blue entries show where Michael claimed to be for work purposes. The red entries show where he actually was based on credit card transactions, GPS data from his phone, and photographic evidence from social media. The family stared at the display in stunned silence as the scope of Michael's deception became clear. Every supposed business trip had been a lie. Every emergency meeting had been a romantic getaway. Every professional conference had been a cover for his affair. Uncle Frank, with his business background, was the first to understand the implications. Michael, are you telling us that every business trip you've taken this year was actually this? It's not what it looks like, Michael protested, but his voice lacked conviction. He was overwhelmed by the sudden exposure and struggling to construct a defense. Then what is it? Demanded Anthony, his paternal authority evident in his tone. Explain to us what we're looking at, because it certainly looks like evidence of adultery and lying to your family. But I wasn't finished. I pulled out my second poster board revealing the financial evidence I'd discovered. But that's just the beginning, I announced. What I discovered next was even more shocking. The board displayed a comprehensive breakdown of Michael's expense reports, color-coded to show legitimate business expenses versus fraudulent claims. The fraudulent expenses were highlighted in red, and they dominated the presentation. Over the past 5 years, Michael has submitted $127,000 in fraudulent expense reports to his employer. I announced. He's been stealing money from MedCore Solutions to fund his personal activities, including his relationship with Amanda. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that crowded gathering. Every family member was staring at Michael, waiting for him to deny the accusations, to provide some explanation that would make sense of what they were seeing. But Michael said nothing. He stood in the center of the gathering, his shoulders slumped, his carefully maintained facade completely destroyed. Ladies, have any of you ever seen someone's entire world collapse in real time? Share your thoughts in the comments, because watching Michael in that moment was both satisfying and heartbreaking. This was the man I'd loved for 25 years, and I was watching him realize that everything was over. The evidence continued to unfold as I displayed board after board, packet after packet of documentation, financial fraud, systematic lying, vendor conspiracies, and finally the most devastating revelation of all, Michael's comprehensive plan to abandon his family forever. Michael has been planning to leave his job, liquidate his assets, and move to Charleston with Amanda. I announced, displaying apartment lease agreements and financial transfer documents. The lease begins Monday. This family reunion was intended to be his final goodbye, though none of you were supposed to know it. Grandma Thompson gasped audibly. "You were going to leave without telling us." I displayed the final piece of evidence, a series of text messages between Michael and Amanda, discussing their freedom and their plans for a new life together without the complications of Michael's family obligations. With all the evidence displayed and explained, I turned to face Michael directly. "So when you say you need to leave for a work emergency," I said, my voice carrying across the silent gathering, "what you really mean is that you're abandoning me at your family reunion to run away with your mistress, using money you've stolen from your employer to start a new life in another state." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Every family member was staring at Michael, waiting for him to deny the accusations, to provide some explanation that would restore their faith in him. But Michael had no answer. The golden boy of the Thompson family had been revealed as a criminal, an adulterer, and a man planning to abandon everyone who loved him. And ladies, in that moment of absolute silence, I finally felt free. Are you ready to hear what happened next? Because the family's reaction was something none of us could have predicted. Hit that like button if you're as invested in this story as I was in living it, and let me know in the comments. Do you think Michael deserved what happened to him? The truth was finally out, and there was no going back. Ladies, what happened next was unlike anything I could have imagined. Even after all my careful planning, The silence that followed my revelation lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. 75 people all staring at Michael, all processing the fact that the man they'd loved and trusted for decades had been living a complete lie. Then the dam broke. Julie, Michael's mother, was the first to completely lose her composure. She started sobbing, not the gentle tears of disappointment, but the deep, gut-wrenching sobs of a mother whose heart was breaking in real time. "How could you plan to leave us forever without saying goodbye?" she cried, her voice barely recognizable through the tears. "We're your family, Michael. We love you unconditionally, and you were just going to disappear." But it was Anthony's reaction that truly shocked me. Michael's father, the gentle patriarch, who'd always been so proud of his middle son, stood up from his lawn chair with a fury I'd never seen from him before. "You used our family name," he said, his voice shaking with rage as he pointed an accusatory finger at Michael. "You took our love, our trust, our support, and you turned it into a cover story for criminal activity. Do you have any idea what you've done to us?" Ladies, let me ask you something. Have you ever witnessed the moment when someone's entire family turns against them? When people who've loved someone unconditionally suddenly see them for who they really are? Share your thoughts in the comments, because it was one of the most powerful and terrible things I've ever seen. Spencer, Michael's older brother, was pacing back and forth behind the chairs, running his hands through his hair as he processed the information. "I can't believe this," he kept repeating. "I can't believe my own brother was planning to steal money and abandon his family. What kind of person does that?" But it was Uncle Frank's reaction that really drove home the business implications of what Michael had done. Frank owned his own construction company and understood financial fraud better than most. "Michael," he said, his voice deadly serious, "do you understand that you've made your entire family potential accessories to federal crimes? Every family member who received money from you, every relative who provided you with alibis for your supposed business trips, we're all potentially implicated in your fraud scheme." Cousin Pete was staring at his evidence packet with the expression of someone who'd just learned he had a terminal illness. "My daughter's college tuition," he said quietly. "I told her how proud I was that Uncle Michael was helping us out when we needed it most. That money was stolen from his company." And then there was Aunt Martha focusing on a different aspect of the betrayal that cut just as deep. "All those family gatherings where you bragged about your success?" she said to Michael, her voice bitter with disappointment. "All those times we held you up as an example to the younger cousins? You were lying to us about everything." But the most heartbreaking reaction came from Grandma Thompson. This woman, who'd always had a special relationship with Michael, sat in her chair looking frail and confused, as if the revelation had aged her 10 years and 10 minutes. "I bragged about you to everyone at the senior center," she said, her voice barely audible. "I told them how proud I was of my successful grandson, how you represented everything the Thompson family stood for. I told them you were proof that hard work and moral character still mattered in this world." Ladies, I want you to understand something here. Watching Grandma Thompson's reaction, seeing the devastation in her eyes, that was the hardest moment for me in this entire ordeal. Because I'd done this. I'd chosen to destroy this sweet old woman's faith in her beloved grandson. And even though Michael deserved to be exposed, even though the family deserved to know the truth, seeing her pain was almost unbearable. Have any of you ever had to hurt someone you cared about in order to protect them from a bigger hurt? Let me know in the comments, because that's exactly what this felt like. Michael's words seemed to hit him harder than all the anger and accusations from other family members. For the first time since the confrontation began, he showed genuine remorse rather than self-preservation. "Grandma, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I never meant for any of this to hurt you." But Grandma Thompson just shook her head slowly. "That's the problem, Michael. You never thought about how your choices would hurt any of us. You only thought about yourself." As the emotional shock began to wear off, family members started asking practical questions about the consequences of Michael's actions. Uncle Frank, with his business background, was the first to address the legal implications. "Michael, you need to understand that this isn't just a family matter anymore," he said grimly. "Wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, these are federal crimes. When your company discovers what you've done, this will become a criminal investigation." Anthony nodded in agreement. "And every family member who received money from you will need to document those transactions for the authorities. We're all going to be questioned about our knowledge of your activities." The realization that their beloved family reunion was about to become evidence in a federal criminal case added another layer of devastation to an already overwhelming situation. This wasn't just about Michael's betrayal anymore. It was about how his crimes would impact every single person in that gathering. Throughout the family's explosive reactions, Michael remained largely silent. He'd initially tried to offer weak explanations and justifications, but the comprehensive nature of the evidence and the depth of his family's shock had apparently convinced him that damage control was impossible. He stood in the center of the gathering, like a man awaiting execution, occasionally opening his mouth as if to speak, but then closing it again without saying anything. The confident, charming Michael Thompson, who'd been the family's golden boy, had completely disappeared, replaced by someone who looked broken and defeated. Ladies, I have to tell you something that might surprise you. Watching Michael in that moment, seeing him so completely destroyed, I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. I felt empty, sad, like I was watching the death of someone I'd once loved, even though that person had never really existed. Have any of you ever gotten the justice you wanted, only to find that it didn't feel the way you thought it would? Share your experiences in the comments, because I think this is something we need to talk about. As the initial emotional chaos began to settle into grim reality, Anthony took control of the situation with the authority that had made him the family patriarch. "This family needs to make some decisions," he announced, his voice carrying across the gathering. "Michael has betrayed not just Sarah but all of us. We need to decide how we're going to handle this going forward." The family had unconsciously formed a circle around Michael, who remained standing in the center like a defendant awaiting sentencing. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The golden boy, who had once been the center of family pride, was now literally surrounded by the people he'd deceived. "First," Anthony continued, "we need to decide whether Michael is welcome at future family gatherings. I'm calling for a family vote. All in favor of permanently excluding Michael from Thompson family events, raise your hand." Ladies, what happened next still gives me chills when I think about it. The response was immediate and unanimous. Every adult hand went up without hesitation. Even Julie, despite her tears, raised her hand to vote against her own son. The message was clear. Michael's betrayal had been so comprehensive that there was no path to redemption within the family structure. They were choosing integrity over blood values, over loyalty. "The vote is unanimous," Anthony announced. "Michael Thompson, you are no longer welcome at Thompson family gatherings. You have forfeited your right to be part of this family through your own choices." But the family's response to me was completely different, and it caught me off guard. As soon as the vote was complete, Julie came over and wrapped me in the biggest hug. "Sarah, I want you to know that you'll always be part of this family," she said through her tears. "Regardless of what happens with Michael, you've shown more integrity and courage than he ever did." Her words were echoed by other family members who made it clear that their loyalty lay with the victim of Michael's betrayal, rather than with Michael himself. Aunt Martha took my hands and said, "You did the right thing, honey. We needed to know the truth." Even Grandma Thompson, despite her devastation, managed to squeeze my hand and whisper, Thank you for being brave enough to tell us. Ladies, I cannot tell you how much their support meant to me in that moment. I'd been so focused on exposing Michael that I hadn't really thought about what would happen to my relationships with his family afterward. To have them choose me to have them affirm that I belonged with them, regardless of my marital status, it was overwhelming. Spencer approached Michael with car keys in hand, his expression cold and formal. "I'll drive you back to Atlanta tonight," he said, "but this is the last favor I'll ever do for you. After tonight, you're not my brother anymore." The finality in Spencer's voice seemed to break something in Michael. For the first time since the confrontation began, he showed genuine emotion. Not self-pity or anger, but what appeared to be genuine remorse for what he'd lost. "Spencer, please," Michael said, reaching toward his brother. "I know I've made mistakes, but mistakes," Spencer cut him off. "You call 5 years of systematic fraud and planning to abandon your family mistakes. You call betraying everyone who ever loved you a mistake." Spencer turned away from Michael without waiting for an answer. The rejection was absolute and final. Uncle Frank stood up to address the practical implications of Michael's crimes. "Every family member who received money from Michael needs to understand that those funds were stolen," he said grimly. "We're going to need to coordinate with authorities to document these transactions and potentially return the money to Michael's employer." The financial reckoning was staggering. Pete would need to figure out how to handle his daughter's college tuition. Cousin Lisa would have to address the small business loan Michael had given her. Multiple family members had unknowingly become recipients of stolen money. "We'll work together to handle this properly," Anthony assured the family. "We'll contact attorneys tomorrow to ensure we're protected legally and that we cooperate fully with any investigation." As Michael gathered his belongings under the watchful eyes of his former family, a new dynamic began to emerge. The Thompson family would survive his betrayal, but they would be forever changed by it. The innocence and trust that had characterized their relationships was gone, replaced by a harder wisdom about human nature. But there was also something beautiful happening. In choosing to stand with truth and integrity over family loyalty, they were proving that their values meant more to them than their blood relationships. They were showing that the Thompson family name still meant something, even if Michael had tried to destroy it. As Spencer's car pulled out of the driveway with Michael in the passenger seat, the Thompson family stood together, watching their former golden boy disappear into the darkness. There was no sadness in their farewell, only the grim satisfaction of having removed a cancer from their midst. "Well," Anthony said finally, "I think this reunion is officially over." But as the family began the process of packing up and preparing to leave, there was a sense that something important had happened. The truth had been revealed, justice had been served, and the family had proven that their values meant more to them than their loyalty to any individual member. Michael Thompson was gone, but the Thompson family would endure. Ladies, let me fast forward 6 months to show you how this story really ends. I'm standing in my new apartment overlooking the Atlanta skyline, a cup of coffee in my hands, and a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The divorce had been finalized within 60 days. Michael didn't contest anything, knowing that fighting would only expose him to additional criminal liability. He'd plea bargained his federal charges down to 3 years in prison, forfeiting all assets to pay restitution to his employer. The house we'd shared for 25 years was sold, with most of the proceeds going to MedCore Solutions as part of his settlement. But here's the beautiful part. The Thompson family had rallied around me in ways I never expected. Julie called me every week to check in. Anthony and Uncle Frank had helped me move and set up my new life. Spencer had become the protective big brother I'd never had. They'd made it clear that Michael's banishment didn't extend to me. I was still family, perhaps more so now than when I'd actually been married to their son. They'd seen my character in the way I'd handled the situation, and they'd chosen to keep me in their lives. My forensic investigation business had exploded after word spread about my comprehensive exposure of Michael's crimes. Lawyers throughout Georgia were referring clients to me impressed by the thoroughness and professionalism of my work. I'd hired 2 assistants and was considering opening a second office. The irony wasn't lost on me that Michael's betrayal had inadvertently launched my career into a new stratosphere. His attempt to destroy my life had instead revealed capabilities I didn't know I possessed and opened doors I hadn't known existed. More importantly, I discovered who I was when I wasn't defined by being Michael's wife. The shy, accommodating woman who'd spent 25 years making excuses for her husband's behavior had been replaced by someone confident, independent, and unwilling to accept less than she deserved. I'd started dating again, carefully with the wisdom that comes from having been thoroughly deceived once. But I was no longer afraid of trusting people. I'd learned to verify trust through evidence rather than assuming it through hope. Ladies, let me ask you something. How many of you have discovered strength you didn't know you had after going through a difficult situation? How many of you have found that your biggest challenges led to your greatest growth? Share your stories in the comments because I think we need to celebrate these transformations. The Thompson family had emerged stronger from Michael's betrayal. They'd proven that their values meant more to them than their loyalty to any individual family member. The next reunion, held just 3 months after Michael's exposure, had been smaller but more genuine. The artificial perfection was gone, replaced by authentic relationships built on actual knowledge of each other. Grandma Thompson, who I'd worried about the most, had surprised everyone with her resilience. "I'm disappointed that Michael fooled me," she told me at that next reunion, "but I'm proud that this family chose truth over comfort. That's what real character looks like." Jessica and David, my children, had been incredibly supportive throughout the entire process. They'd been shocked by their father's betrayal, but they'd also told me how proud they were of my courage in exposing the truth. "Mom," Jessica had said, "you taught us what real strength looks like. Not the kind that hurts people, but the kind that protects people by refusing to let lies continue." David had been even more direct. "Dad's choices were his own, but your choice to stand up for yourself and protect the family from his lies. That's the parent I want to be like." As I reflected on the journey from discovering Michael's first lie to watching him disappear from all our lives, I realized the most important lesson wasn't about betrayal or revenge. It was about the quiet strength that comes from refusing to be diminished by someone else's choices. Michael had underestimated me for 25 years, seeing me as a convenient cover story for his crimes, rather than as a person capable of exposing them. His fatal error wasn't just moral, it was strategic. He'd married his own worst nightmare and never realized it. But here's what I want every woman watching this to understand. You are stronger than you think you are. You have more power than you know, and you deserve so much better than being lied to, manipulated, and betrayed. If you're in a situation where something doesn't feel right, trust that instinct. If you feel like you're being gaslighted or manipulated, document everything. If you discover betrayal, don't let anyone convince you to stay quiet to protect someone else's reputation. Your truth matters. Your peace matters. Your dignity matters. Ladies, I also want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough, the aftermath of taking a stand like this. Because while I'm proud of what I did, and while it was absolutely the right choice, it wasn't easy to live with in the weeks and months that followed. There were nights when I questioned whether I should have handled things differently. There were moments when I felt guilty about destroying Michael's relationship with his family, even though he'd brought it on himself. There were times when I missed the life I'd known, even though it had been built on lies. Recovery from this kind of betrayal isn't linear. It's not like you expose the truth and then everything is suddenly perfect. There's grief for the life you thought you had, anger at the time you lost, fear about the future you have to build from scratch. But there's also something incredibly powerful about reclaiming your own narrative, about refusing to be a victim of someone else's choices, about discovering that you can survive things you never thought you could survive. I started seeing a therapist, something I probably should have done years earlier. I learned about patterns of manipulation and how to recognize them. I worked on rebuilding my sense of self-worth after years of being made to feel like I was never quite enough. Most importantly, I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means integrating your experiences into a stronger, wiser version of yourself. The woman I am today is not the same woman who discovered those text messages on Michael's phone. She's not the woman who spent years making excuses for behavior that should have been inexcusable. She's someone who knows her worth, who trusts her instincts, and who refuses to settle for less than she deserves. And ladies, that transformation is available to all of us, regardless of our age or circumstances. I was 58 when I took control of my story. It's never too late to choose yourself. Now I want to address something directly to those of you who might be facing similar situations. If you suspect your partner is cheating, if you're being lied to, if you feel like you're going crazy because your reality doesn't match what you're being told, you're not imagining it. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Don't let anyone gaslight you into thinking you're being paranoid or oversensitive. And remember that you have more options than you think you do. You don't have to confront someone immediately. You don't have to make decisions before you're ready. You don't have to protect someone else's reputation at the expense of your own truth. Take time to gather information. Take time to prepare. Take time to build your support system. And when you're ready to act, do it from a position of strength rather than reaction. But most importantly, remember that whatever you discover, whatever you're dealing with, it's not a reflection of your worth. Other people's choices to lie, cheat, or betray trust are about their character, not yours. You deserve honesty. You deserve respect. You deserve to be with someone who chooses you every day, not someone who's secretly planning to leave you. As we wrap up this story, I want to thank all of you beautiful ladies who've been following along. Your comments, your support, your own stories that you've shared. They mean the world to me. If this story has resonated with you, please share it with other women who might need to hear it. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because I have so much more I want to share with you about rebuilding your life, recognizing manipulation, and finding your strength. And remember, you are more powerful than you know. You are braver than you believe, and you are worthy of so much more than settling for lies and betrayal. Sometimes the quiet ones are quiet because they're busy building evidence. And sometimes when people finally speak up, the whole world listens. The truth didn't just set me free. It revealed exactly who everyone really was. And that knowledge, as painful as it was to acquire, was worth everything. Thank you for listening to my story, ladies. Keep trusting your instincts, keep supporting each other, and keep believing in your own strength, because you have more power than you think you do. Until next time, remember, you're not alone, you're not crazy, and you're stronger than you know. Take care of yourselves, beautiful women. You deserve nothing less than the truth, and you have the power to demand it. Hello again, beautiful ladies. I hope you've been staying with me through this entire journey because what I want to share with you now might be the most important part of this whole story. If you're just joining us, please go back and watch from the beginning. This is a story that builds, and every part matters. Before we dive into today's portion, I want to read you some of the comments you've been leaving because they've touched my heart so deeply. Maria from Texas wrote, "Sarah, I'm 62 and going through something similar. Your story gave me the courage to start documenting everything." And Linda from Ohio said, "I wish I'd had your strength when I was younger. Thank you for showing us it's never too late to find our voice." Ladies, these comments are exactly why I'm sharing this story. Because if my experience can help even one woman find her strength, then everything I went through was worth it. Now it's been 2 years since that family reunion, and I want to talk to you about what I've learned in the time since. Because the story doesn't end with the confrontation, and it doesn't end with the divorce. The real story is about what happens next, how you rebuild, how you heal, and how you create a life that's authentically yours. Let me start with something that might surprise you: forgiveness. Not forgiveness of Michael, that's a whole different conversation, but forgiveness of myself. Because, ladies, I spent months after the reunion beating myself up for things I wished I'd done differently. Why didn't I see the signs sooner? Why did I enable his behavior for so many years? Why didn't I speak up when my instincts first told me something was wrong? These questions haunted me for a long time. Have any of you ever blamed yourselves for someone else's bad behavior? Have you ever wondered what you could have done differently to prevent someone from hurting you? Let me know in the comments, because this is something so many of us struggle with. Working with my therapist, and yes, ladies' therapy, was crucial to my healing. I learned that self-blame is often easier than accepting that someone we loved was capable of such calculated cruelty. It's easier to think I should have known than to accept he deliberately deceived me. But here's what I want every woman watching this to understand. You are not responsible for other people's choices to lie, cheat, or betray trust. You are not responsible for being trusting when someone presents themselves as trustworthy. You are not responsible for believing someone when they look you in the eye and lie to you. The only thing you're responsible for is how you respond once you know the truth. And ladies, I'm here to tell you that it's never too late to respond with strength and dignity. Let me share something with you that happened about 6 months after the reunion. I was at the grocery store just doing my weekly shopping when I ran into one of Michael's former colleagues, someone who'd worked with him and Amanda. "Sarah," she said, looking genuinely surprised to see me. "How are you doing? I heard about everything." At first, I felt that familiar flush of embarrassment. You know the feeling, when your private pain becomes public knowledge and you feel like everyone's looking at you with pity. But then something shifted. I stood up straighter, looked her in the eye, and said, "I'm doing wonderfully, actually. Best I've felt in years." And you know what? It was true. Because I'd stopped carrying the shame that belonged to Michael. I'd stopped feeling embarrassed about being deceived and started feeling proud of how I'd handled the situation once I knew the truth. That's when I realized something important. There's a difference between being a victim and being victimized. I was victimized by Michael's choices, but I refused to remain a victim, and that distinction made all the difference in how I approached my new life. Ladies, let me ask you something. How many of you have been made to feel ashamed of someone else's bad behavior? How many of you have carried guilt that didn't belong to you? Share your experiences in the comments, because we need to talk about this more. Now, I want to address something that several of you have asked about in the comments: dating after betrayal. Because yes, I am dating again, and it's been quite a journey. About a year after my divorce was finalized, my friend convinced me to join a dating app designed for people over 50. I was terrified, ladies, absolutely terrified. How do you trust again after being so thoroughly deceived? How do you open your heart when you know how badly it can be broken? My first few dates were disasters. Not because the men were terrible, but because I was so hypervigilant, so suspicious of every inconsistency that I couldn't relax enough to enjoy myself. I found myself fact-checking everything they told me, looking for red flags in every conversation. I remember one poor man told me he was a retired teacher, and I spent the entire dinner mentally cataloging ways I could verify his employment history. Another mentioned he had 2 children, and I immediately started wondering if he was lying about his family situation. I realized I was letting Michael's betrayal poison my ability to connect with new people. That's when I knew I needed to do more work on myself before I could be fair to anyone else. Have any of you struggled with trust issues after being betrayed? How did you work through them? Let me know in the comments, because this is such an important part of the healing process. I went back to therapy specifically to work on this issue. My therapist helped me understand the difference between being cautious and being paranoid. She taught me that healthy skepticism was good. I should verify important information and trust my instincts when something feels off. But I also needed to give honest people the benefit of the doubt. She helped me develop what she called graduated trust, the idea that trust should be earned over time through consistent actions not given blindly from the beginning. This was actually healthier than how I'd approached my marriage with Michael, where I'd trusted completely without ever verifying. About 6 months ago, I met someone. His name is Robert. He's 62 and he's a retired engineer who lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago. We met at a volunteer event. We were both helping to build a Habitat for Humanity house. What I love about Robert is that he understands the importance of transparency because he's been hurt too. On our third date, he voluntarily showed me his phone, his social media accounts, even his financial statements. Not because I asked, but because he understood that trust needs to be actively built, not just assumed. Ladies, I want you to know that good men exist. Men who understand that if they want to be with a woman who's been betrayed, they need to be patient with the healing process. Men who prove their trustworthiness through actions, not just words. But I also want you to know that being alone is perfectly fine too. The time I spent single focusing on rebuilding my life and rediscovering who I was outside of marriage was incredibly valuable. I learned to enjoy my own company, to make decisions based on what I wanted rather than what someone else expected. I traveled, something Michael had never been interested in. I took cooking classes, joined a book club, started hiking. I discovered parts of myself that had been dormant for decades. Have any of you experienced that kind of self-discovery after a major life change? Share your stories in the comments because I think we need to celebrate these journeys of personal growth. Now, let me talk about something that's been incredibly important to my healing, helping other women. Because sharing my story with you isn't just therapeutic for me, it's become part of my mission. Since starting this channel, I've received hundreds of messages from women who are dealing with similar situations. Some are just beginning to suspect something's wrong. Others have discovered betrayals and don't know what to do next. Still others are years into their healing journey and want to share their own stories. I've started what I call Truth Teller Tuesdays, live streams where women can call in and share their experiences or ask for advice. We've created a community of women who support each other through these difficult journeys. One of the most powerful things I've learned is that we're not alone in these experiences. The details might be different, but the patterns of deception, the gaslighting, the way we question our own perceptions, these are common experiences that too many women share. Let me tell you about Sandra, a 67-year-old woman who called into one of my live streams. She'd been married for 43 years when she discovered her husband had been having affairs for decades. She felt like it was too late to start over, like she was too old to rebuild her life. Sandra, I told her, you're not too old to choose yourself. You're not too old to demand honesty and respect. And you're certainly not too old to be happy. 6 months later, Sandra sent me a photo of herself on a Mediterranean cruise, something she'd always wanted to do, but her husband had always refused. She looked radiant-free, genuinely happy for the first time in years. Ladies, it's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to demand better. It's never too late to start over. But let me also talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough, the financial aspects of leaving a long-term marriage later in life. Because while choosing yourself is emotionally necessary, it can be financially terrifying. When I left Michael, I was 58 years old, with a small freelance business and no retirement savings of my own. Everything had been in joint accounts that were now part of the divorce settlement and restitution for Michael's crimes. I had to completely rebuild my financial life from scratch. I moved from a 4-bedroom house to a 1-bedroom apartment. I went from having a joint income of $150,000 a year to making maybe $30,000 from my freelance work. It was scary, ladies. Really scary. There were nights when I lay awake wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake, if I should have just stayed quiet and tried to make the marriage work. But you know what I learned? I'd rather live authentically on a tight budget than live a lie in financial comfort. I'd rather have a small apartment where I feel peaceful than a big house where I feel constantly anxious. And something amazing happened when I started focusing on building my own financial security. My business grew. Because when you're working for yourself, when your survival depends on your own efforts, you find motivation and creativity you didn't know you had. The forensic investigation business I mentioned earlier has become incredibly successful. I now make more money than I ever did as part of a couple, and it's money I earned through my own skills and effort. Have any of you had to rebuild financially later in life? What challenges did you face, and how did you overcome them? Share your experiences in the comments, because financial independence is such an important part of personal empowerment. Let me also address something that some of you have mentioned in the comments. What happened to Michael and Amanda? Because I know you're curious, and honestly, it's part of the story. Michael served 18 months in federal prison. His sentence was reduced due to his cooperation with the investigation and his agreement to pay full restitution. He lost his professional license and will never work in pharmaceutical sales again. When he was released, he moved to a different state and took a job in retail management. His salary is a fraction of what he used to make, and he's still paying restitution to his former employer. As for Amanda, she was also investigated, but wasn't charged criminally since she hadn't been directly involved in the expense fraud. However, she was fired from MedCore Solutions and found it difficult to get another job in the pharmaceutical industry. Last I heard, she was working for a much smaller company at a significantly lower salary. Their relationship didn't survive the legal troubles and public exposure. Amanda left Michael about 6 months after the reunion, apparently deciding that a man who would steal and lie wasn't the partner she wanted after all. Do I feel sorry for them? That's a question I've been asked many times, and the answer is complicated. Do I feel sorry that their lives are harder now? On a human level, yes. Do I feel responsible for the consequences of their choices? Absolutely not. They made their decisions knowing they were hurting people and breaking laws. The consequences they're facing are the natural result of those choices, not punishment that I imposed on them. But here's what I want to focus on: instead of their consequences, the positive changes that came from exposing the truth. The Thompson family, despite the initial devastation, is stronger now than they were before. They've learned to be more discerning about the people they trust, but they've also deepened their relationships with each other. Grandma Thompson, who I was so worried about, has become one of my closest friends. She tells people that I saved the family from living a lie, and she's proud of the courage I showed. "Sarah," she told me recently, "you did what needed to be done." That's what real family does for each other. The family's business relationships have actually improved because they're now known for their integrity. When Uncle Frank's construction company bids on jobs, clients know they're dealing with people who value honesty over convenience. Most importantly, the younger generation in the family has learned valuable lessons about character integrity and the importance of making good choices even when no one is watching. Let me share something that happened at last year's Thompson family reunion. Yes, I still attend, and yes, I'm still considered family. Michael's nephew Jason, who's now 22, pulled me aside to thank me. "Aunt Sarah," he said, What you did taught me something important. You showed me that real love sometimes means telling difficult truths. You showed me that protecting someone from consequences isn't actually protecting them at all. Ladies, that's when I knew that everything I'd gone through had been worth it. Because the next generation was learning from our experience, and they would make better choices because of it. Now, as we near the end of today's portion, I want to talk about something that's become central to my new life authenticity. Because living through Michael's deception taught me the difference between looking good and being good, between appearing successful and actually being fulfilled. In my marriage, I'd spent so much energy maintaining appearances, making sure we looked like the perfect couple, making sure Michael's reputation stayed intact, making sure everyone thought we had it all figured out. Now I live differently. I'm honest about my struggles as well as my successes. I'm real about the challenges of dating in your 60s, about the difficulties of rebuilding financially, about the ongoing process of healing from betrayal. And you know what? People respond to authenticity. My relationships now are deeper and more meaningful than they ever were when I was trying to be perfect. My business clients trust me because they know I'll tell them the truth, even when it's not what they want to hear. My children respect me more now that they see me as a complete person with strengths and vulnerabilities, rather than just the perfect mom who never showed her struggles. Have any of you found that being more authentic actually improved your relationships? Let me know in the comments, because I think this is one of the most important lessons we can learn. As we wrap up today's portion, I want to leave you with some practical advice for anyone who might be facing a similar situation. First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that you're being paranoid or oversensitive. Second, document everything. Take screenshots, save receipts, keep records. You might never need them, but if you do, you'll be glad you have them. Third, build your support system before you need it. Cultivate relationships with people who will stand by you when things get difficult. Fourth, take care of your financial independence. Make sure you have your own accounts, your own credit, your own income sources. Financial dependence makes it much harder to leave a bad situation. Fifth, remember that you're stronger than you think you are. You can survive things you never thought you could survive, and you can rebuild in ways you never imagined. Finally, know that your story isn't over. Whatever you're going through right now, whatever betrayal or disappointment you're facing, it's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter where you get to be the author of your own life. Ladies, thank you for staying with me through this long journey. Your comments, your support, your own stories that you've shared, they've made this experience so much richer for me. Next week, I'm going to share some specific strategies for recognizing manipulation and gaslighting, because so many of you have asked about this. We're also going to talk about how to have difficult conversations and set boundaries that protect your peace. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I have so much more I want to share with you. And please keep sharing your own stories in the comments. Your experiences matter, your voices matter, and your healing matters. Remember, you are not alone. You are not crazy, and you are stronger than you know. Trust yourself, choose yourself, and never settle for less than you deserve. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Beautiful women, the world needs your strength, your wisdom, and your truth.